Downtown Beirut, once bustling, now lies in ruin. Furious Lebanese citizens blame government negligence for the explosion which devastated their capital. The government quits in response, but can anything save the country from total collapse? I'm Ali Aslan, and today's newsmaker is the aftermath of the Beirut blast. People around the world watch Beirut's enormous explosion in disbelief, asking how such a disaster was allowed to happen. But for most people inside Lebanon, the answer was painfully clear. Years of corruption and mismanagement by the political elite had turned Lebanon quite literally into a powder keg. As the dust settles, the true extent of the devastation is emerging. Close to 200 people have died, thousands are injured, and hundreds of thousands are homeless. And the shockwaves are still being felt throughout society and the country's leadership. The government has resigned under pressure from protesters, but as Adam Platz reports, that hasn't exactly filled people with hope that things will change.
As if Lebanon wasn't already on its knees, its capital is reeling from one of the largest non-nuclear explosions in history. The blast was caused by almost 3,000 tons of ammonium nitrate, ignited by a fire presumed to be an accident. The chemicals were confiscated at the port in 2013 and had been stored in a warehouse ever since, despite multiple requests from port authorities to remove them. More than 170 people were killed in the explosion, 7,000 wounded, and dozens are still missing. At least 250,000 people's homes were destroyed, and the cost of repair could be as high as $15 billion. And then there's the political fallout.
أمام هذا الواقع نتراجع خطوة إلى الوراء للوقوف مع الناس كي نخوض معركة التغيير معهم. نريد أن نفتح الباب أمام الإنقاذ الوطني الذي يشارك اللبنانيون في صناعته. لذلك أعلن اليوم استقالة هذه الحكومة.
But Prime Minister Hassan Diab's resignation has not quelled protests. His government of technocrats is accused of being a front for a kleptocracy. It will continue as a caretaker administration until a new government is formed. Since October, protesters have been calling for an end to Lebanon's sectarian political system. They say corruption is the root cause of both the explosion and the country's economic collapse.
When the revolution broke out at the beginning, some people didn't participate in demonstrations. But after the explosion, all the people participated in the protests because a lot of people died. We don't have enough money to eat or to live. We are not asking anything unusual. We only need a normal life.
The international community will provide $300 million of emergency assistance following a donor conference hosted by France. President Emmanuel Macron has visited the worst affected and coincidentally Christian neighborhoods of Beirut.
Je suis là et c'est mon devoir pour vous aider en tant que peuple, pour vous apporter les médicaments, le soutien, de quoi vous nourrir et de quoi vous aider à reconstruire. Elle sera transparente, elle ira sur le terrain, elle sera garantie pour qu'elle n'aille pas dans les mains de la corruption.
And those are the hands of the political elite, which the world's nations have stressed will not receive any aid directly. The IMF is in longer-term negotiations to provide billions of dollars of aid contingent on economic reforms, but they will need a government to negotiate with. As Lebanon falls headlong into economic collapse, might the explosion prove to be a deadly blow to the country's sectarian political system, which protesters say has failed them so badly? Adam Platz, The Newsmakers.
Joining me now in Beirut is activist Sarah Himadeh. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us. Clearly no easy times for your country. Before we get into the political fallout and ramifications of this attack, it's my understanding that you and your family have been personally affected quite negatively by the explosion.
Yes, our apartment is destroyed and my brother was injured, but we are all physically okay right now.
So my sympathies go out to you, and thankfully no physical harm then took place. But clearly a very devastating moment for your country. Clearly Lebanon, any country would have been hit hard by this explosion, but this comes at a very inopportune time for your country. It was already in the midst of a very deep socioeconomic crisis. What do you make of this explosion right now? Is it almost symptomatic for the situation that your country finds itself in?
Yes, it is symptomatic of the government right now. A government that has left us with no electricity. They have spent about $40 billion on electricity infrastructure, which is 40% of the current government debt. And we have about 2 hours of electricity a day. We have to power our own electricity if we can afford it with generators. And those revenues go into the pockets of the government. They played a Ponzi scheme. They ran a Ponzi scheme and plummeted, as you said, the economy into the worst crisis we have ever seen. We have informal capital controls on our banks, which essentially implies that we have lost our savings. Our currency is devalued by 80%. And we are swimming in our own trash. The government has yet to implement a waste management strategy. Open air burning and illegal dumping are way too common and have caused a great deal of health consequences. And now the negligence of having and storing 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate at the port has caused this disaster.
Clearly, listening to you, it's quite clear that you deeply believe that the government has failed its people. Any hope on your part that there'll be accountability for those who are responsible for this explosion?
Yes and no. I sincerely hope that we will hold international independent investigations for what happened on August 4th, 2020. Unfortunately, our government is rejecting the idea of an international investigation, and there is no surprise there. And again, we've got corruption in our judiciary system. Too many political parties influence the judiciary. So without an independent judiciary system, we can have no accountability. That is why it is of crucial importance to conduct international independent investigation.
You are a prominent voice even before this explosion when the protests were already taking place. What kind of change would you like to see right now taking place in your country?
Well, we'd like to start off whether I'm sure you've heard of the Prime Minister and its cabinet coming down, and some of the members of parliament are also resigning. If we are to hold early elections or elections in due time, we cannot have any election without any electoral law reforms, because it is a trap into the vicious cycle that is our system. We need to also have an independent election monitoring entity during our elections, and then we can start to build and be represented in the parliament and government and build from the ground up from there.
So clearly the government resigning and now serving as a caretaker government is not enough. It needs more than that. It needs to go beyond that, right?
Oh, we definitely have to go beyond that. The parliament still has the greatest influence, actually, the parliament and the president. So the prime minister resigning is of almost no importance. It is creating momentum, but we need the parliament to resign. We need the president to resign. And if we were to hold new elections, as I said, early elections or elections in due time. We need electoral law reforms. Without that, there will be no change.
It's very evident that you are disappointed, to say the least, in the ruling parties and elites in your country. I'm going to speak to Member of Parliament Alain Aoun in just a moment. What would you like me to pass on to him? What question, what message would you have for him?
The message I have for him is, I'm less speechless. I'm just saddened. I'm infuriated. I am heartbroken at the way our government is treating its people. It's people that are a beautiful people. If you go down on the streets in Beirut right now, all you see are NGOs and people cleaning the streets of cleaning the destruction. And I ask them, is it really worth it? Is whatever going on really worth it?
Sarah, thank you so much.
Really worth treating your people like this?
Message well received and will be passed on in just a second. Thank you so much, Sarah, for joining us from Beirut, and all the best to you and your family. Let's go to our panel now. Alain Aoun is a Lebanese member of parliament and part of the President's Free Patriotic movement. And Nizar Ghanem is the director and co-founder of the Triangular Policy and Research Consultancy. Alain Aoun, we just spoke to Sarah Himadeh. I believe you listened to the last portion of it, at least. She says, is it really worth it? Is it worth what the government is doing? I want to pass on her message to you to react.
Well, I don't represent the government itself here now in the panel. Let's say, okay, I'm part of the majority. And if she's referring to the blast, of course, it's something that happened that is really very sad. It's a disastrous. It's a big tragedy. Everyone was affected on a personal level, and lots of Lebanese were affected. I think she was one of them, and there are lots of people, including member of parliaments, that were affected themselves. So what I want to say is that I understand totally the anger and of the people for what happened, and there's definitely a general responsibility to all the state institutions when you have such a failure in your system, whether it's due to the negligence or whatever the investigation will prove. In all cases, everyone in the state should bear its part of indirect responsibility, definitely, because you are in power, you are in responsibilities, whatever your responsibility is. This said, what would define exactly the direct responsibilities is an investigation that will tell what exactly happened. I'm a member of parliament, let's say, at the time this tragedy happened. Does it mean that I'm a direct responsible for this accident itself? No, because in all cases, me and lots of other MPs from all parties, opposition or majority, weren't aware of anything in the port. So which means this doesn't mean that I don't understand that there's a big anger that existed anyway before. This distrust between lots of people and the political class. It existed before because of the revolution in October, and then
absolutely
in the financial crisis, and now it's adding up with this big tragedy that happened.
Right, and staying on the explosion, you said you are advocating. I heard you. You are advocating for an investigation. Sarah Himadeh, however, is saying a domestic internal investigation is not enough. What we need is an independent international investigation. Would you support that?
Well, there is two opinions about that. I think that there is a way of, we have absolutely to include an international dimension for the investigation. I believe it's an assistance like the French that are already doing. It was announced also by the government, or it's we need in all cases an international involvement in this investigation. Some would say the international investigation could take time. Why not going into this local investigation? In any case, it's so huge, no one can manipulate or play games with this investigation. But Anna, I believe that others would say completely international investigation, regardless of these. I mean, if it's driven really by politics or by real. I'm not talking about Sarah, but I'm talking about some political parties calling for that, or by really people searching for the truth. I believe that I completely agree that there should be definitely an international involvement in this explosion, expertise, whatever, because the source of this ship, this nitrat, there should be definitely somehow an international cooperation that has to be that we need in order to reach the whole truth about what happened.
And obviously, Nizar, you as well, very much like Sarah, whom we spoke to previously, you've been affected quite personally by this explosion. You shared some photos on Twitter of your apartment, look quite horrific, and thankfully you, physically at least, seem to be unharmed. What do you make of this very troubling situation right now in your city and in your country?
Well, I mean, this is an unprecedented explosion in Beirut that destroyed half of the capital. Funny enough, ironically, when Macron came, it is the 100th anniversary of the declaration of Grand Mount Lebanon. Lebanon used to be a small Ottoman province, that is Mount Lebanon, and it was expanded by the French in the 1920s. After 100 years, we come to a point, a juncture in the life of this nation, whereby Beirut is basically a lawless city run by what is basically mafia lords. Let's face it, there is no government in Lebanon, there is no president. There are paramilitary groups such as Hezbollah that are basically running the deep state. And the others are just warlords, where even the structure of the parliament or the cabinet doesn't exist. What exists is alternative bureaucracies in the country. And even with these, they couldn't manage a simple thing of safekeeping of chemical materials. I think that we definitely need an international investigation. We need not only just the resignation of the government, as just happened, we need the resignation of President Aoun as well, because it is let's face it, it is President Aoun's compromise with Hezbollah that brought about the current government and the current phase of Lebanese politics, which isolated Lebanon internationally, which led to a severe fragility in the state structure, by opening Lebanon basically to an isolation, unprecedented isolation in its history. So definitely we would need an international investigation committee, a new independent government with legislative powers that could start a new electoral law which would produce a new political reality in Lebanon. And I think this is what President Macron was saying, that Lebanon is at the juncture after 100 years of its establishment. Either we become a failed state, or we push for a third republic, a new republic. The problem is that the current powers, Mr. Alain Aoun is one of them as well, are not willing. I'm very doubtful if they're willing to push the government and the whole country in that visionary sense that was a new Lebanon.
Well, let's
so
give Alain.
Unfortunately, we need lots of international pressure and lots of domestic pressure
Absolutely.
in terms of demonstrations.
Let's give Alain an opportunity to respond, because the accusation that you are pointing towards him and the whole political class in Lebanon are quite severe, saying we don't really have a government, we don't have politicians. You included this, Alain Aoun. What do you make of the accusations? Obviously, protests took place even before the explosion, and people no longer trust politicians such as yourself. They're looking for a fresh start, not just reform, but an entirely new fresh start. What do you say to that?
Well, I already said before he talked that I believe there are lots of people who are in mistrust the political class. That's true. Others support them. The country is divided. We have to admit, as well as I'm admitting that there is definitely a trust and confidence crisis between part of the people and the political class. The other part should also acknowledge that there are also people that are supporting these political parties. In all cases, without going into any discussion about that, this would be defined in new elections, where the new elections will bring again representatives, and everyone will be represented as by the people's will. So the opposition or people who are today out of the political system will get represented, and the same apply for the others. As for Hezbollah's hegemony, I don't think that Hezbollah was created on Aoun's term, presidential term, or existed just because Aoun wanted it to exist. Hezbollah exists since 1985. It's in the political spectrum, just in the institutions after the civil war, a long time before Aoun came back to Lebanon and got elected, etc. So, and they are here because there are people who elected them. They are not here because Aoun created them. So we have also to be fair about their presence, that as they are part of the political spectrum. You can get allied to them or not. This is another question. This is a part of the political game. You choose whatever you want. But just saying that, I mean, you cannot, because you dislike people in politics and in the political class, you cannot disregard that these people were elected in elections. And this is what happened in 2018 where we got elected. Hala, you don't like me, you like someone else, this is your right, definitely. And this is where you will exercise your right to vote. You had to exercise it in 2018, and you might have to exercise it when the next elections would come. And I don't mind personally having early elections.
Right.
So just to be, I agree on something with Nizar, that we definitely need a new Lebanon. We definitely need a new Lebanon. Yani everyone believes that this system failed. Those who tried it are convinced, and we are part of them. We are convinced that this system doesn't work. And those who are not yet in power, like Nizar or others, already have this conclusion, because we have all the same conclusion about the failure. That it doesn't. I mean, it's a cumulative failure.
Let's ask Nizar. You already conceded that a new Lebanon is very much needed. Nizar, if you could design in a utopian world, if you could design this new Lebanon, what would that look like?
I mean, honestly, I mean, any new Lebanon, we cannot have our port not controlled by our government. There is our parliament is a shadow parliament. We do not control, for example, what happened in the port. There are so many claims. There are claims that, for example, Hezbollah used to stockpile weapons there that were used in the barrel bombing of Syria, for example. That is one claim. Another claim, we have so many, that Israel might have hit it. We have so many claims that we don't know, because we need an international investigation committee. What I'm saying is, how is it possible when we speak about democracy, what is this kind of democracy where it's a light touch democracy? We only control who comes to power, maybe, but we don't control the policies of the state because it's enforced by other players in the region. There's no sovereignty in that sense. And that is my problem with what Aoun did with Hezbollah, in a sense, is basically gave legitimacy in that sense to another state, to a deeper state in Lebanon. That's one. The second thing about that new Lebanon, of course, we will never be able to stop the production of politics. In a sense, we will always have Shia, we'll always have Christians, we'll always have Druze, we'll always have a multi-confessional system. But we will produce institutions to manage this diversity in a way that does not produce oligarchs, that does not make the state a failed one, whereby it's only 6 lords in a feudal sense who rule the state, and where basically we can enforce some form of neutrality in the conflicts of the Middle East. We actually preserve the independence of Lebanon. The current government, since Aoun's coming to power, has managed to do the opposite. Instead of maintaining a balance of power in Lebanon and neutrality, we have gone to a full-blown confrontation inside Lebanon that is threatening the fabric of the state itself.
Nizar, do you think...
It is so dangerous, and that is the main message of yes.
And do you think, in a strange, twisted, and even macabre way, perhaps, that this tragedy is so severe and so impacted the whole nation? Do you think that it took a tragedy like this to bring about real change in your country? Do you foresee something like this actually will come out of this?
You know, optimism of the will, pessimism of the mind. I'm pessimistic on the ability of the current elites to guide the country because I think they're bankrupt. But I'm optimistic in the sense I believe in the new generation, and I believe in our power and our ability to enforce that change. So in a sense, we're in a liminal phase. We will wait and see. If Lebanon makes it alive out of this, it has to do a drastic change on every level.
Alain,
we have to dismantle the current oligarchs that rule this country.
And that includes Alain Aoun as well, is what you're saying?
I mean, he's an okay guy, but his bloc is part of this corruption, unfortunately.
Alain Aoun, what do you make of the accusation or the demand on the part of the people saying no fresh start can be made with politicians and the ruling elite such as yourself right there? Would you be willing to step aside for this new fresh Lebanon that you yourself have advocated for on this program?
I don't think that Nizar is taking it. I don't think that what Nizar is saying is a personal thing. I don't think the problem is only my person. It's a general problem he's talking about. But I agree.
But you are part of it, of course.
No, of course. I'm part of this political system. But that doesn't mean that I look like it. But definitely, maybe I couldn't change it. I agree on that. There are lots of things that I couldn't change. And this is why I say this is a system that is difficult to be changed. You need real reformist people with real beliefs, modern ideas. It could include me. It cannot include me. I don't mind. I mean, I absolutely believe that the new Lebanon should be, let's say, with a new generation.
Unfortunately, we have to wrap it up there. But clearly, I think the anger came through on the show and the dismal situation that Lebanon is facing. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for now. Thanks for watching. See you again next time.